How
The
could you
human
let this
soldier
happen?
chose the
The
weakest
Tartano
alien
is
princess.
ruined!
As his
Your
prize, the
Majesty,
reason
we are
will
doing
surprise
everything
you.
in our power to
Smoke
salvage the
rose from
situation.
shattered alien cities, and the remnants of massive fleets floated like dead stars in space. The war had lasted 10 years, but today, humanity had finally gained the upper hand. The human military was young compared to the ancient alien civilizations they fought, yet it had something none of the older empires fully understood: resilience. Humans adapted. Humans endured. And humans, when cornered, fought in ways that no algorithm, no machine, no alien strategy could predict. Elias had been part of this unpredictable force for over a decade. He had seen entire planets rise and fall, witnessed friends vanish in explosions that made the stars themselves seem small. Today, however, was different. Today, the war was over. The alien coalition had surrendered. Their leaders were battered, their fleets decimated. In the aftermath of the war, the human high command had declared a tradition rooted in both honor and diplomacy. The victors would select a royal heir from among the defeated nations as a prize. These heirs would serve as ambassadors, forging new ties between civilizations. Some would say it was a show of power. Others would say it was a gesture of peace. Elias was assigned to choose a princess, not for himself, at least that was what he told himself, but as part of a larger strategic plan. The alien princesses were varied. Some were strong, commanding, and radiant. Others were small, timid, or fragile, hiding behind layers of court etiquette. When he first met the candidates, Elias felt a strange hesitation. He looked over the line of alien royalty. Princess Kalira of Zethon exuded strength. Her glare could burn through steel. Princess Varina of Tulmara had a fleet at her command, and her presence alone could silence an entire room. But then there was Princess Lyra of Lumeria. She was quiet. Her posture was humble, almost shy. Her hands trembled slightly as she bowed. In the eyes of the human officers around him, she was the weakest. Everyone expected Elias to choose Kalira or Varina. "Why would you take the weak one?" his fellow captain, Rain, whispered, a hint of scorn in his voice. "We need power and influence, not that." He gestured dismissively toward Lyra. Elias studied her for a long moment. There was something about the way she observed the room, silent, calculating, never wasting a glance. Her weakness was obvious at first glance, but he sensed there was more beneath the surface. He made his choice. Lyra. The room erupted in whispers. Officers exchanged incredulous looks. Some openly laughed. Others shook their heads, muttering about foolishness and lost opportunity. Elias ignored them. "This is not about power," he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "Sometimes strength is not measured by what you show, but by what you hide." No one challenged him after that. Lyra's journey with Elias began immediately. She was escorted to the human command ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest alien warships. The ship hummed with activity, soldiers preparing for post-war duties, engineers repairing damage, scientists documenting alien technology. Yet through it all, Lyra remained quiet. She did not fidget or complain. Instead, she watched. She observed the humans with a curiosity that was both cautious and sharp. Elias noticed it. "You're studying them," he said. Lyra nodded. "I must understand. If I am to survive, I must learn who you are." There was no arrogance in her voice, only a calm resolve. Elias found it refreshing. Most of the alien royalty he had encountered in his life assumed humans were primitive, brutes with little thought beyond war. Lyra did not assume. She observed. The trip to the human homeworld took several weeks. During that time, Elias and Lyra shared long hours in the observation deck, staring at stars and discussing the war, their cultures, and the fragile hope of peace. Elias was careful not to ask questions that might offend her pride, yet he found himself learning as much from her as she did from him. Lyra spoke of Lumeria, her home planet. She described the forests that glowed at night, the floating cities, and the lessons of her people. "The strongest rulers are not always the bravest in battle. They are those who survive. Pride blinds the powerful. Patience hides the clever." Elias found her words strange yet familiar. Humans had survived countless conflicts, not always through strength, but through adaptation, cunning, and patience. Here was an alien who understood this truth. When the ship finally entered human-controlled space, the officers were preparing for a celebration. The war was over, and the humans had triumphed. Yet, as Elias watched Lyra step out of her quarters, he noticed a subtle tension in her movements. She was small and delicate-looking, but her eyes were sharp, scanning everything, noting every detail. "You are different from what I expected," Elias admitted, walking beside her as they moved through the bustling corridors. Lyra tilted her head slightly. "And you are different from what I expected. I thought humans only fought with strength and weapons, yet you survive with more." Elias smiled faintly. "More, what do you mean?" "Ingenuity, resilience, caution, patience. These are weapons, too," she said softly. The human officers did not understand. To them, she was fragile, a mere trophy, but Elias saw something different. She had the mind of a strategist, tempered with humility. She did not seek glory or fear. She sought understanding. And in that, Elias recognized a rare quality, a kindred spirit. Weeks passed. Lyra adjusted to life among humans, learning their language, their customs, and their surprising sense of humor. She struggled at first with the loudness of human ships, the bright lights, and the seemingly endless chatter. But she adapted quickly. Elias observed her closely. She asked questions not to challenge authority, but to understand context. She noticed patterns, predicted outcomes, and offered subtle suggestions during planning sessions, small ideas that often had big impacts. Her apparent weakness in the eyes of the officers began to show cracks. Her intelligence shone through in ways no one expected. One evening, while the crew celebrated their victory, Elias found Lyra standing alone at the observation deck, staring at a distant nebula. "You're thinking about your people," he said quietly, joining her. Lyra nodded. "They will rebuild. I must be ready. I must ensure that their mistakes do not repeat." "And you will," Elias replied. "But remember, you are not alone. You have allies here, humans who respect your mind, not just your title." She smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and understanding. "Then perhaps I chose the right guide." Elias shook his head slightly. "No, Princess, you have guided yourself. I only followed." It was true. Elias had chosen her for reasons that others could not understand. Strength was obvious. Bravery could be measured in battle. But intelligence, patience, subtlety, these were rarer, hidden traits. And Elias trusted that Lyra possessed them in abundance. As the human fleet prepared to establish peace talks with neighboring systems, whispers began to circulate. Other officers questioned Elias' choice, wondering if the so-called weak princess could handle the pressures of diplomacy. Elias paid no attention. In his mind, the real challenge was not in proving her strength to others, but in surviving the subtle dangers that awaited them in the galaxy. And there were dangers. Unseen threats lurked in the shadows. Rogue factions, disgruntled warlords, and ambitious rivals who saw the human-alien alliance as weakness to exploit. Elias knew that brute force alone would not guarantee victory in the days to come. He needed strategy, foresight, and allies who could anticipate the moves of those who could not be defeated by weapons alone. Lyra, the quiet, overlooked princess, was exactly what he needed. For the first time in his life, Elias Kane felt the calm certainty that comes before a storm, knowing that the person beside him, whom everyone else dismissed, held the key to survival. The galaxy might have thought her weak, but Elias knew the truth. Strength often hid behind humility, and the greatest victories came from those who no one expected to win. The war was over, but the real story, the story of courage, cunning, and human ingenuity, was just beginning. And Captain Elias Kane, with the princess no one believed in, was ready to face it all. The human command ship cruised silently through the star systems, leaving behind the echoes of a war that had shaped an entire galaxy. Captain Elias Kane walked through the ship's corridors with Princess Lyra at his side. The hum of the engines and the soft chatter of the crew formed a backdrop to the unspoken tension between victory and the unknown. Lyra had been quiet during the voyage, but not idle. She had spent hours observing every detail, the way humans operated their control panels, how they interacted, the subtle gestures of officers giving commands. To anyone else, it may have seemed curiosity, even nervousness. But Elias had long since learned that observation was the first step to understanding. "You watch everything," Elias remarked casually as they walked past a group of engineers repairing a damaged communications array. Lyra's amber eyes met his, thoughtful and calm. "I must. To survive, I need to know how humans think, how they act. Otherwise, I am nothing but a liability." "You are far from a liability," Elias said. "You see things others miss. You notice patterns. That is more useful than strength or weapons, far more." Lyra nodded, though her expression did not change much. There was a discipline in her that reminded Elias of the best soldiers he had trained with, the kind that was calm, patient, and quiet until the moment for action arrived. The ship's journey was long, giving them time to talk. Elias asked about Lyra's home world, her family, and her upbringing. She spoke softly but clearly, describing her world with a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. Lumeria, she explained, had been a planet of scholars, scientists, and explorers. The royal family, though small in number, had always prized intelligence and strategy over brute force. Strength is visible, she said, but intelligence is invisible. And the invisible is far more dangerous. Elias listened closely. He understood immediately. Humans often relied on instinct, improvisation, and cunning to survive. Lyra's words reflected a similar philosophy in her people, planning ahead, observing weakness in others, and using patience to turn the tide of conflict. "What about the other princesses?" Elias asked. "The ones everyone believes are stronger." "They are loud," Lyra said softly, almost to herself. "They demand attention, they show power, but they are predictable. The stronger a person appears, the more mistakes they make, the more they underestimate those who seem small or weak." Elias nodded, impressed. Her words resonated with him. In every battle he had fought, he had seen that arrogance and pride often caused the downfall of the mightiest. Lyra's weakness was a mask, and Elias began to see the truth behind it. Her apparent vulnerability was a shield, hiding a sharp mind. One evening, as the stars glimmered outside the observation deck, Lyra spoke of her experiences during the war. She had been sheltered, trained in the ways of survival rather than combat. Her instructors had taught her diplomacy, strategy, and observation. "I have never held a weapon," she admitted, "yet I have learned to anticipate the moves of those who do." Elias leaned back in his chair, considering her words. This princess, whom everyone dismissed, had survived in a court filled with cunning and deceit. She had endured because she could read people, anticipate danger, and act when no one else expected her to. "You understand more than anyone gives you credit for," he said. Lyra looked at him, a flicker of emotion in her amber eyes. "And you chose me even when everyone else laughed. Why?" Elias shrugged lightly. "Because I saw what others could not. Strength is not only about fighting. Strength is about survival, about knowing what to do when everything is against you. You have that strength even if no one else sees it." For the first time, a small smile appeared on Lyra's face. It was fleeting but genuine, a sign of trust that she rarely showed. Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. He had chosen her not for appearances, not for status, but because he recognized the value of subtlety, intelligence, and patience, the qualities that often decided the outcome of wars. As the fleet approached a neutral system for diplomatic talks, reports came in about unrest in neighboring star systems. Rogue factions, opportunistic warlords, and mercenary groups had begun to take advantage of the power vacuum left by the fallen alien coalition. The humans had expected resistance, but these reports suggested something larger, more organized, and dangerous. Lyra listened to the updates, her face calm but alert. She began asking questions, small and precise, about fleet movements, trade routes, and the allegiances of various leaders. Elias watched her quietly, impressed by the depth of her understanding. Unlike others who reacted with emotion, she analyzed each piece of information carefully. "You think like a tactician," he said quietly during a briefing. "Most humans don't." "Perhaps," she replied, "but tactics are universal. Every species has rules, weaknesses, and predictable patterns. You simply have to learn them." Her insight impressed even the senior officers. Some began to wonder if Elias had made a mistake, but Elias ignored the whispers. He had chosen Lyra for reasons no one else could see. A few days later, the ship docked at the diplomatic station. Aliens from various systems had gathered, curious about the humans' victory and wary of new alliances. The atmosphere was tense, filled with suspicion and unspoken threats. Elias noticed it immediately. Negotiations could turn violent at any moment, and every word spoken could be a test of loyalty or strength. Lyra, however, remained composed. She observed the alien delegates with quiet attention, noting their gestures, expressions, and tones. She asked subtle questions to gather information, never speaking unless necessary. By the end of the day, she had already learned more about the political landscape than many seasoned diplomats. Elias realized something important. Her weakness allowed her to move unnoticed. No one expected her to understand or interfere, yet she was quietly collecting information, building alliances in small, careful ways. One evening, Elias and Lyra walked through the station's gardens. Bioluminescent plants lit the paths with a soft glow, and alien birds sang in the trees. The scene was peaceful, but both knew danger lurked beneath the surface. "You trust easily," Lyra said suddenly, breaking the silence. Elias looked at her. "I don't, I choose carefully. And you have proven yourself in ways others cannot see. That earns trust." Lyra considered this. "Trust is dangerous," she said. "It can be betrayed, but I think humans understand risk differently than my people. You embrace it, yet you prepare for it. That is rare." "That's what keeps us alive," Elias replied. "Adaptation, preparation, and knowing who is capable. I see capability in you, Lyra. You just hide it well." They walked in silence for a few moments, each reflecting on the war and the uncertain future. Lyra had come to realize that humans, though seemingly blunt and unpredictable, had a depth of strategy and courage that mirrored her own training. And Elias understood that strength was not always in the sword or the fleet, but in the mind capable of using them wisely. In the following days, small incidents began to test them. A shipment of supplies was attacked by a rogue mercenary group. Lyra suggested a clever diversion, using the mercenaries' assumptions against them. The humans executed her plan, and the attackers were captured without a single human casualty. Another time, an alien diplomat tried to intimidate Elias and his team by making veiled threats. Lyra quietly advised on phrasing and timing, helping Elias turn the conversation to humanity's advantage. Her weakness became irrelevant in moments that required intelligence and foresight. Elias began to notice the change in the crew as well. Officers who had mocked him now watched Lyra with curiosity, and some even began seeking her advice. The princess they had dismissed as fragile was proving herself indispensable. One night, as the ship sailed through a nebula, Elias and Lyra looked out at the stars. The universe stretched endlessly before them, full of unknown dangers and opportunities. "You will face challenges," Elias said quietly. "Not every system will be friendly. Not every leader will respect diplomacy. You must be ready." Lyra nodded. "I will. I have survived courts far more dangerous than space. I have learned patience, observation, and strategy. I will adapt." "And I will be there," Elias said. "Not to fight for you, but to fight with you. Strength is shared, not given." Lyra looked at him, her expression thoughtful. For the first time, she allowed herself a hint of warmth. "Then perhaps I was not as weak as everyone thought." "You never were," Elias replied. The journey ahead was uncertain. Rogue factions, political intrigues, and hidden enemies awaited. But Elias knew one thing. He had chosen the right ally. The princess no one believed in would soon show the galaxy that strength comes in many forms. And for the first time since the war ended, Elias felt a quiet confidence that humanity and its allies could face whatever the stars held. The diplomatic station hung like a jewel among the stars, shining against the darkness of the void. Ships from countless systems came and went, each carrying delegates, soldiers, and traders. Peace was fragile. The war had ended, but tensions simmered beneath the surface, and not everyone welcomed humanity's victory. Captain Elias Kane and Princess Lyra moved carefully among the corridors, aware that every glance, every word, could be observed by spies or opportunists. The princess had grown more confident in recent weeks. Her quiet observation had already earned her respect among some human officers, though whispers still lingered among skeptics. Reports began arriving of a rogue faction operating on the edges of the galaxy. These were not ordinary rebels or mercenaries. They were well-organized, well-funded, and highly strategic. Their goal seemed simple: destabilize weakened systems, exploit political uncertainty, and challenge the fragile new peace. Elias read the reports with growing concern. "They're planning something big," he muttered, "and they're not just attacking humans, they're trying to manipulate the other alien systems against us." Lyra leaned over his shoulder, studying the data on the screen. "They are not careless," she said. "Everything is planned. Every strike is calculated to create fear, distrust, and confusion." "Exactly," Elias replied, "which means we can't respond with force alone. We need strategy, precision, and foresight. We can't fight what we can't predict." Lyra nodded, her eyes sharp. "Then we must predict. And to predict, we must observe. Listen, learn who they trust and who trusts them. Weakness hides in arrogance, and arrogance is their greatest mistake." Elias felt a quiet admiration. No one else on the station thought like this. No one else saw patterns where danger hid behind the chaos of the universe. Lyra's weakness was now clearly revealed as intelligence, hidden, subtle, and powerful. The first warning came in the form of a minor incident. A supply convoy en route to a nearby system had gone missing. At first, it seemed like a simple theft, perhaps by pirates taking advantage of post-war confusion. But Lyra quickly noticed anomalies in the reports, timing discrepancies, unusual communications, and patterns that hinted at coordination beyond ordinary crime. "They are testing," she said quietly. "They want to see how we respond, to learn our methods, to find gaps." Elias frowned. "So this is just the beginning." Lyra nodded. "Yes, if we act too soon we reveal ourselves, too late and they strike where it hurts most. We need patience and subtlety." Together, they began analyzing the rogue faction's movements. Lyra's method was meticulous. She compared star maps, trade logs, and communication intercepts. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The rogue faction seemed focused on destabilizing diplomatic relationships, creating mistrust among systems that had survived the war. Their ultimate goal appeared to be control through manipulation rather than direct conflict. Elias was impressed. He had fought wars, led missions, and studied strategy, yet Lyra's approach revealed things he might have missed. Her intelligence was not about brute knowledge. It was about seeing the unseen, anticipating moves before they were made, and exploiting mistakes that others assumed were invisible. A week later, a tense meeting was called at the diplomatic station. Delegates from multiple systems gathered in a grand chamber. The air was thick with caution. Leaders eyed one another warily, aware that alliances formed in these halls could be fragile and fleeting. Elias and Lyra attended as observers and advisors. The rogue faction had begun sending secret messages to the delegations, trying to pit systems against one another. Lyra noticed subtle changes in behavior, gestures, whispers, and pauses that revealed uncertainty. She began quietly advising Elias, suggesting ways to subtly shift conversations, calm fears, and reinforce trust. "You're turning this," Elias whispered during a pause. "No one else even sees it." Lyra's lips curved in a faint smile. "They believe they control the narrative." "They do not. They are blind to what is subtle. We will use their blindness against them." As the meeting progressed, Lyra discreetly communicated with trusted human officers, guiding them to ask questions or make remarks that exposed hidden loyalties. Slowly, the rogue faction's influence began to falter. Their manipulations were subtle, but Lyra's keen observation revealed them. By the end of the session, alliances were strengthened instead of weakened. Some delegates even approached Lyra privately, curious about her insight and understanding of alien strategies. It was remarkable. The princess who had been dismissed as weak was now quietly shaping the outcome of galactic diplomacy. That night, Elias and Lyra reviewed the events in the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly outside the glass, distant suns twinkling like tiny beacons in the darkness. "You were right," Elias said. "The rogue faction is clever, but they underestimate you. They believe weakness hides nothing. You've proven them wrong." Lyra shook her head. "Weakness is never obvious. It is patience. It is silence. It is the ability to wait for the right moment to act." Elias smiled faintly. "That patience might just save the galaxy." Her eyes met his, serious yet calm. "Or doom it if we fail." Elias knew she was right. The stakes were high. Every move they made could influence the delicate balance of power among hundreds of systems. He had fought wars where the stakes were survival, but this challenge was different. It was a game of intelligence, observation, and anticipation, where one wrong step could spark chaos. The following days were filled with subtle challenges. Minor attacks on trade routes, unusual communications, and unexplained disappearances all pointed to the rogue faction's growing activity. Lyra worked tirelessly, studying every report, analyzing every message, and predicting the next move. Her weakness had been her strength all along, invisibility in plain sight. Elias noticed the change in the human officers as well. Those who had mocked him now began to consult Lyra, seeking her advice before acting. They realized that she could anticipate outcomes that others could not, and her insight saved time, resources, and potential disasters. Lyra, however, remained humble. She did not seek recognition. She focused on the work, quietly guiding the humans, subtly influencing negotiations, and preparing for what was coming. "You work too hard," Elias said one evening, handing her a cup of warm tea. Even the cleverest minds need rest. Lyra smiled faintly. Rest can wait. Danger does not sleep, and we cannot afford to be careless. Her words reminded Elias of every mission he had led where patience and observation had saved lives. He knew she was right. One morning, the rogue faction made their first bold move. They attempted to intercept a convoy carrying diplomats and essential supplies. At first, the attack seemed straightforward, brute force against human defenses, but Elias and Lyra noticed inconsistencies. The attackers were careful, avoiding direct confrontation, and seemed more interested in observation than destruction. Lyra quickly devised a plan. She suggested using decoys, false communications, and subtle maneuvers to lure the attackers into a trap. The humans executed her strategy flawlessly, and the rogue faction scouts were captured without a single human casualty. Elias watched as the officers marveled at the results. "It's incredible," one whispered. "She's amazing." Elias simply nodded. He had known it all along. Strength was not always visible. Power was not always loud. And the princess they had dismissed as weak was proving to be one of the most valuable allies humanity had ever had. By evening, the diplomatic station was calm again, but tension lingered in the air. Elias and Lyra walked through the gardens, reflecting on the day. "They learn slowly," Lyra said, "but they will learn. Every mistake, every miscalculation brings them closer to revealing their weaknesses, and when they do, we will be ready." Elias smiled. "And they will never see it coming. That's the advantage of patience and observation. That's why I chose you. You understand it better than anyone." Lyra's expression softened slightly. "Then perhaps my weakness was never real. It was only the mask I wore to survive." "You wore it well," Elias said, "and now it's time to use it for something greater." The stars beyond the glass stretched into the endless void, a reminder that the galaxy was vast, filled with unknown dangers and hidden opportunities. Elias knew that the real challenge was only beginning. The rogue faction was clever, patient, and dangerous, but Lyra's insight, combined with human adaptability, gave them a chance that few could have imagined. And so, the human soldier and the princess the galaxy underestimated prepared for the battles that lay ahead. Battles that would not be fought only with weapons, but with minds, strategy, and courage. In the shadows, unseen by most, the rogue faction watched and waited, unaware that the weakest princess was already one step ahead. And in that quiet confidence, Elias Kane felt certain of one truth. The galaxy had underestimated Lyra, and that mistake would change everything. The quiet tension that had hung over the diplomatic station for weeks finally shattered. Early one morning, alarms echoed through the corridors as reports arrived of a coordinated attack on multiple sectors of the station. The rogue faction had launched their full plan, not simply to test, but to strike decisively. Captain Elias Kane moved quickly through the command center, scanning the reports with a sharp eye. "They've targeted the supply lines, communications hubs, and delegations all at once," he said. "This is no random attack. They want to destabilize everything at the same time." Beside him, Princess Lyra remained calm, her amber eyes steady. "They are confident in their strength. They believe speed and aggression will overwhelm us, but confidence can blind the clever, and they are very blind." Elias felt a rush of respect for her. He had long known that strength alone could not win wars. Strategy, patience, and perception often decided outcomes. Lyra's mind was already working, seeing patterns in chaos, anticipating moves before anyone else could. The first threat appeared at the northern docking bay, where a convoy carrying diplomats from newly allied systems was under siege. Human security forces had the upper hand in firepower, but the attackers were not here to fight. They were here to observe, probe, and create confusion. Lyra studied the incoming communications, noticing inconsistencies and patterns. "They are not attacking randomly," she said. "They are looking for gaps. Every strike is meant to distract us from their real target." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Which is?" Lyra's voice was calm but decisive. "The council chamber. They want to disrupt the leaders' meeting, sow distrust, and force chaos in the negotiations." Elias immediately understood. If the council were destabilized, the fragile peace would collapse. All their efforts in diplomacy could be undone in a single coordinated strike. "Then we stop them," he said, "and we do it quietly." Lyra quickly devised a plan. She instructed officers to create decoy communications, sending false reports of the council relocating to different areas of the station. She identified the most likely routes the rogue faction would take, then positioned teams to intercept them. Elias watched as her strategy unfolded. Every detail was considered: timing, movement, reaction, and deception. She did not rely on strength or weapons alone. She relied on observation, intelligence, and subtle manipulation of the enemy's assumptions. The first wave of attackers arrived at the station gates, expecting an empty council chamber. Instead, they encountered human forces prepared with precision. Confusion spread among them as decoy messages led them in the wrong direction, and carefully planned countermeasures forced their retreat. Elias could not hide his admiration. "You've turned their plan against them," he said. Lyra's expression was calm. "We have only slowed them. They will try again. They always do." Meanwhile, the rogue faction attempted to infiltrate the station's communications hub. Their goal was simple: cut off coordination between humans and allied delegations, creating fear and isolation. Lyra anticipated this move. She instructed a small team to monitor the hub, not to confront the attackers directly, but to manipulate signals and intercept messages. Through subtle adjustments, they created false signals, making the intruders believe they had succeeded while human forces quietly contained the threat. By the time the rogue faction realized the deception, it was too late. Their advantage had been neutralized without a single direct confrontation. Elias watched the operations from the command deck, realizing something profound. "The galaxy underestimates intelligence," he said aloud. "Strength can intimidate, but strategy wins wars. And no one strategizes like Lyra." Lyra looked at him, her calm gaze unwavering. "Strength is obvious, strategy is invisible. That is why they never see it coming." As the day progressed, the rogue faction launched one final attempt. They aimed to disrupt the station's energy core, a bold move that would have plunged the station into darkness and chaos. Human engineers were ready to defend, but Lyra suggested a subtle adjustment in timing and energy routing, creating a controlled feedback loop that not only protected the core, but also trapped the attackers in a contained area. The rogue faction's failure became complete. Their aggressive strikes had been turned against them, their attacks predicted, and their movement anticipated. The council remained safe, the diplomats remained calm, and the human forces were not only unscathed, but had captured crucial intelligence on the attackers' strategies. Elias approached Lyra as the situation stabilized. "You've saved the station, the council, and possibly the entire peace process," he said. Lyra shook her head. "We've done more than survive. We've shown that patience, observation, and subtle action are stronger than brute force." "The galaxy will learn that eventually," Elias smiled. "And they will underestimate you until it is too late." In the aftermath, humans and alien allies began to recognize Lyra's role. What had once been whispered doubts about her weakness turned into open admiration. Delegates approached her, seeking insight and guidance. Officers consulted her before making strategic decisions. She had become a symbol of hidden strength, the quiet mind capable of altering the course of events. Even Elias' fellow captains, who had mocked him weeks ago, now acknowledged the wisdom of his choice. He had selected not the loudest, strongest, or most glamorous princess, but the one whose mind and patience would prove invaluable. "You chose wisely," Captain Rain admitted reluctantly. "I did not understand it before, I do now." Elias only nodded. "Strength is not always visible, and intelligence is its own power." That evening, Lyra and Elias walked along the station's observation deck, overlooking the vast nebulae and distant stars. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. "They believed I was weak," Lyra said softly, her gaze fixed on the stars. "But weakness is only what others perceive. I have always been prepared for what they could not see." "And that is why you survived," Elias replied, "and why you will continue to thrive, not because of power or title, but because of your mind and your courage." Lyra considered this. "Perhaps my survival was meant for a greater purpose, to show that intelligence and subtlety are as valuable as strength. That underestimation can be the greatest advantage." Elias smiled. "Exactly, and together we can ensure the galaxy learns this lesson." In the following weeks, the diplomatic station resumed normal operations. Systems that had once wavered in uncertainty began to cooperate. The rogue faction, having failed to destabilize the council, retreated to the shadows. but their presence remained a threat, a reminder that vigilance was always necessary. Lyra continued to work tirelessly, analyzing reports, advising on diplomatic matters, and quietly influencing decisions. Her intelligence became indispensable, her insight respected, and her presence a stabilizing factor in the fragile peace. Elias, watching her, reflected on how much the galaxy had misjudged her. What had seemed like weakness had turned into one of the most potent forms of strength imaginable. He realized that sometimes the most underestimated individuals were the ones who could change the course of history. One evening, a human officer approached Elias. "Captain, the princess's advice has prevented multiple crises. Our allies respect her now, and some systems are requesting her presence as a mediator." Elias nodded, a quiet satisfaction in his expression. "She has earned it. But more importantly, she has shown everyone here that strength is not always obvious." Lyra, standing nearby, overheard and simply smiled faintly. She did not boast, did not seek praise. Her satisfaction came from results, from seeing the consequences of careful thought and observation. Elias turned to her. "You know, when I chose you, everyone thought I was foolish. I wonder what they think now." Lyra tilted her head slightly, amusement flickering in her amber eyes. "They may never fully understand, and that is to our advantage." Elias laughed softly. "Indeed, underestimation has always been humanity's greatest weapon, and now it seems to be ours as well." The turning point had arrived. The rogue faction had been contained, their plan foiled, and the fragile peace strengthened. But Elias and Lyra knew the galaxy was still full of unseen threats. Intelligence, cunning, and patience would continue to be tested. Yet for the first time, Elias felt confident that they could face whatever came next. Not because they had the largest fleet or the strongest weapons, but because they had strategy, foresight, and the quiet strength of someone the galaxy had dismissed as weak. And that was the greatest weapon of all. As the stars shimmered beyond the station's walls, Elias Kane looked at Princess Lyra and realized that the galaxy had yet to see the full measure of her power. She was no longer the weakest princess. She was a force invisible to those who judged by appearances, a mind capable of shaping the future of countless worlds. And the story of how a human soldier saw beyond appearances and chose wisely was just beginning. The diplomatic station had never been quieter, yet the tension in the air was thick. Weeks of careful observation, subtle strategy, and quiet negotiation had given humans and their allies an advantage few could have predicted. The rogue faction that had once threatened the fragile peace now lurked in the shadows, weakened and cautious. But their presence was a reminder. The galaxy was full of dangers, and diplomacy was often as delicate as any battlefield. Captain Elias Kane stood near the observation deck, looking out at the endless stars. Beside him, Princess Lyra observed the movements of distant ships, her amber eyes calm but alert. Over the past weeks, she had grown in confidence, her mind honed by challenges that required subtlety, intelligence, and patience. The princess the galaxy had dismissed as weak was now recognized by humans and aliens alike as a vital force in maintaining peace. "You've changed the perception of everyone here," Elias said quietly. "They no longer see you as the weak princess. They see your mind, your strategy, your insight." Lyra tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "They still underestimate the human soldiers. You all fight with courage, but they rarely see your foresight, your ability to adapt. I think we make a good team, Captain." Elias allowed himself a small smile. "I've always known the value of observation, patience, and careful planning, but you make it look effortless." The next council meeting brought all the Allied leaders together. Ships from dozens of systems gathered, their delegations eager to witness the strength of the human-alien alliance. Tension was high, mistrust had lingered for centuries, and many were unsure if this fragile peace could last. Lyra took her place beside Elias at the council table. She did not dominate the conversation, nor did she boast of her victories. Instead, she spoke calmly, offering insights that were precise, subtle, and persuasive. She noticed the smallest gestures, a delegate hesitating before speaking, a hand clenching slightly, eyes darting toward a trusted aide. Every detail informed her suggestions. Elias watched her, quietly impressed. Her intelligence guided their actions more than any weapon could. She advised when to speak, when to wait, and how to align the interests of multiple civilizations in ways that created cooperation rather than conflict. By the end of the council session, alliances had strengthened. Systems that had been wary now pledged support, and treaties that once seemed impossible were signed. The rogue faction, observing from afar, realized that subtlety, intelligence, and human-alien cooperation were forces they could not easily overcome. After the council, Elias escorted Lyra through the station gardens. The bioluminescent plants glowed softly, casting gentle light across the paths. It was a rare moment of peace amid constant vigilance. "You have done more than survive," Elias said. "You've built trust, strengthened alliances, and shown that intelligence can protect what brute force cannot." Lyra looked at him, thoughtful. "And you've shown me something important as well. Strength is not always what it seems. Sometimes the smallest, quietest presence can change the course of events. Humans understand this instinctively. You adapt, you endure, you see potential where others do not." Elias nodded. "And sometimes we need someone like you to guide that potential. You've taught us all that what seems weak can be powerful when used wisely." As days passed, Lyra's influence continued to grow. Humans and alien delegates alike sought her advice, valuing her judgment in both diplomacy and strategy. Her humility never waned. She did not seek recognition, only the success of peace and cooperation. One evening, a delegation from a previously neutral system approached her. They had been hesitant to join any alliance, fearing reprisals from the rogue faction. But Lyra's calm reasoning, her subtle insights, and her careful guidance convinced them to join the coalition. Their inclusion strengthened the human-alien alliance considerably. Elias watched the meeting from a distance. He had always believed that humans thrived when they combined courage with intelligence, but Lyra's quiet presence had elevated that philosophy. Together, they were proving that trust, patience, and foresight were as powerful as any weapon. Despite the calm, danger was never far. The rogue faction had not disappeared entirely. They remained in hiding, carefully observing, waiting for a chance to regain strength. Lyra knew this, and she prepared accordingly. Every training session, every review of intelligence reports, every diplomatic negotiation was part of a larger plan to anticipate threats before they emerged. Elias admired her foresight. While most relied on weapons and fleets, Lyra relied on her mind. She anticipated risks, identified patterns, and guided decisions in ways that minimized danger and maximized outcomes. In her presence, even humans accustomed to battle learned humility and the power of strategy. A few weeks later, intelligence came in that the rogue faction had regrouped and planned a final attempt to destabilize the newly formed alliance. This time, their goal was direct: sabotage the main station and capture key leaders to force the coalition to collapse. Elias and Lyra convened their team. Lyra analyzed the incoming reports, mapping every possible path the attackers could take, predicting where they would strike first, and suggesting subtle maneuvers to mislead and trap them. "Remember," she said calmly, "they rely on expectation. They expect force to be met with force. We will give them the unexpected. Patience, observation, and subtle action will be our weapons." The human officers nodded, trusting her judgment. By now, they had seen her wisdom in action and had learned that the quiet princess often held the key to their success. The rogue faction arrived as predicted, attempting to breach the station's outer defenses. But the humans, guided by Lyra's strategy, responded in ways the attackers could not predict. Decoy ships moved into visible positions, while hidden teams redirected the rogue forces, isolating them from their intended targets. Every movement had been anticipated, every action part of Lyra's plan. By the time the rogue faction realized the trap, it was too late. They were cornered, their attacks neutralized without unnecessary confrontation, and key intelligence was captured. The coalition's leaders remained safe, and the fragile alliance strengthened further. Elias watched the aftermath, feeling pride in their joint efforts. Lyra had not only prevented disaster, but had turned the rogue faction's aggression into an opportunity to unify the coalition even more firmly. In the calm that followed, humans and alien delegates recognized Lyra as more than a princess. She was a strategist, a mediator, and a symbol of cooperation. The galaxy began to understand the lesson Elias had seen from the start. Strength was not always measured by power or appearance. True strength often lay in intelligence, patience, and the ability to see beyond what others assumed. Elias turned to Lyra, who was quietly reviewing reports. The galaxy will remember this, he said. Not just the battles, but the wisdom, the patience, and the intelligence that saved so many lives. Lyra smiled faintly. Perhaps. But the real victory is that humans and aliens can work together, understand each other, and build something stronger than fear. That is what matters most. Elias nodded. And you have shown that what others dismiss as weakness can be the greatest advantage. The following months were filled with diplomacy, rebuilding, and continued vigilance. Lyra's role expanded as she helped mediate disputes, strengthen alliances, and guide humans and aliens alike toward cooperative solutions. Everywhere she went, her quiet strength and subtle intelligence inspired respect. Even the most skeptical officers came to acknowledge her value. They realized that victory was not just in winning battles, but in creating understanding, building alliances, and preventing conflicts before they started. Lyra had taught them a lesson that would last far longer than any war. Intelligence, patience, and careful observation were as vital as courage and weaponry. One evening, Elias and Lyra stood on the station's observation deck, watching distant star systems glow with life and promise. The galaxy was still full of uncertainty, but the fragile alliance was stronger than ever. "You've changed the course of the galaxy," Elias said quietly. "Not with weapons, but with your mind, your insight, and your patience." Lyra looked at him, thoughtful. "And you've shown that humans see potential where others cannot. You taught me that strength is not always visible. Together, we've proven it can be recognized and used for something greater." Elias smiled. "The galaxy underestimated both of us, and that mistake will be remembered." Lyra's amber eyes glimmered with quiet satisfaction. "Then let it be remembered. Not as a story of war, but as a story of cooperation, insight, and the power of the underestimated." In the weeks and months that followed, the human-alien alliance flourished. Systems that had once been divided by fear and suspicion now shared trade, knowledge, and protection. Lyra's wisdom guided critical decisions, while humans contributed courage, resilience, and adaptability. Together, they built a new era of cooperation, demonstrating that intelligence, patience, and unity could achieve what brute force alone never could. Elias often reflected on the choice he had made months ago. In a galaxy where the strong were often celebrated and the weak dismissed, he had seen the true measure of potential. He had chosen the princess no one believed in, and in doing so, had discovered a partner who could change the course of history. Lyra, the once overlooked princess, had become a symbol, proof that underestimation could hide incredible strength, and that patience, intelligence, and subtlety could shape the fate of worlds. And as the stars stretched endlessly into the future, Elias knew that humanity and their allies were ready for whatever came next. Together, guided by insight, courage, and careful strategy, they could face any challenge, protect any life, and inspire a galaxy that would finally learn to see strength beyond appearances. The war had ended, but the real story, the story of intelligence, patience, and human insight, was only beginning. And in that story, the quiet princess and the human soldier would be remembered as heroes, not for brute strength, but for the wisdom to see the hidden potential in the underestimated.